So it was a special time of the year, but it wasn't Christmas. It was actually that time between Christmas and New Year's, which is special because that's something I just said. This was about 20 years ago, and my friend Craig and I had actually decided to embark on a journey around Western Europe, all by car. Our trip started in the UK, but we had to get the ferry across the English Channel from Hull, if you've heard of it, to Rotterdam, which was like an overnight affair. So you have to take the car, put it on the ferry, park, and then get drunk. The north of England can actually be very picturesque if you ever have the opportunity to traverse it by car. Small villages and sort of quaint towns nestled at the foot of rolling hills, each with their own sense of charm and intrigue. However, Hull lacks all of these qualities. Predominantly a port city, its industrial aesthetic left us wanting in affection. The queue of cars waiting outside to drive on the ferry made all the sense in the world. The British loved to queue, and now I knew why. We paid our fee and parked in the underbelly of the ship. The ferry to Rotterdam sailed overnight, so we were given keys to a cabin. The space was sort of tiny, comprising of 2 single beds and a bathroom cubicle. Craig looked exhausted as he tucked our suitcases under the corner of our tiny digs, and he sighed. "Yeah, hungry?" "I could use a drink," I replied. "I'm not sure how good the food will be on this boat, but I'm sure the alcohol is as good as any you'd get at any bar." So we started down the hallway with its speckled floor and drab yellow walls, illuminated only by the old fluorescent tubes. The vessel was reminiscent of one of those scaled-down cheap cruise ships, some sort of all-inclusive package where, free food and drinks came at the expense of your dignity. The rickety elevator took us to a lower level where passengers persuaded to part with their change by shopping, gambling, or eating or drinking. We chose the latter. After acquiring a booth within the bar, Craig approached the taps and bought us a couple of pints. Lots of people were there, mostly couples or lone wolves, but also the odd family having dinner. The families retired early, but then leaving the remaining seafarers to drink the night away. Now, I'd been receiving some visual attention from a couple of few booths down. They'd been eyeing off my hooks, and I knew they were looking for a way to start a conversation. I decided to go starboard to smoke. I loved smoking in the cold, never the heat. Staring out over the English Channel was like looking into deep space. I could only imagine what lay further than I could see. My mind was free to fill in all the blanks with all sorts of monsters. Each of my breaths billowed out in large clouds of smoke, promptly whisked away by the wind and dragged out to sea like a current. I stared deep into the abyss, but before it had the chance to stare back at me, I heard a voice behind me. "Got a light, mate?" Most certainly the accent of a northerner, and, by its raspiness, the voice of a man who smoked far too many cigarettes to be lacking in accessories. "I only have matches," I said, "and the wind's pretty strong." I handed him the box and he took out 2 matches. Striking them in unison against the box, it drew like a large flame, which he quickly caught to light his cigarette. "Nigel," he said, exhaled. I hadn't asked. "Tom," I responded, momentarily impressed by his audacity. "Off to Amsterdam for the weekend, me and the missus." I still remember how put off I was by his use of the word missus. I tried to keep an open mind. That's a lie. How the fuck did I write that? He quickly broke off into a rant about spending his afternoon smoking pineapple kush and drinking himself stupid. I felt somewhat out of my element. "Where are you guys from then?" he asked. Since he knew I wasn't travelling alone, it confirmed my suspicions that he and his wife had indeed been eyeing us. Australia, I replied. We've just been in London and then Warrington to visit family. We're driving around the continent in a kind of big loop through the Netherlands, Germany, Austria, Italy, Italy, France, and then back to London. A lot of driving. He seemed uninterested in my answer as he looked out to sea. I realised because he was pondering a more pressing question, which followed shortly after. So, what happened to you then? Now, depending on my mood, my answer to this question could swing in many directions. If there's a good chance I'll never see the person again, I might just concoct a fictitious story. Not because the truth is hard to tell, right? But more because it's entertaining to see how far I can go with it and how much I can do. How far can I push it? I mean, Nigel was the perfect candidate, right? I responded swiftly. I was attacked by a shark back in Australia. His eyebrows raised. I was confident enough in his lack of knowledge on the matter, so I continued. It was a bull shark. I remember thinking that it was cheekily funny how much bull shark sounded like bullshit. Really? His eyes widened further. Shit, mate, are you serious? I responded somewhat smugly, yeah, but you should see the shark. He let out a monotonous roar muffled by the raspiness of his eroded vocal cords that I supposed was his laugh. I suggested we move inside. Nigel and I headed back to our respective booths, or at least that's what I thought. The bar at the time had transformed into kind of a makeshift nightclub with the DJ playing 90s dance tunes at a relatively modest volume to middle-aged British tourists who'd had one too many gin and tonics. It was not a pretty sight. I spotted Craig sitting with his beer, his ear being chewed off by a woman who had taken the seat next to him. Not the seat across from him, the seat next to him. What kind of fucking psychopath does that in a booth? She had trapped him in an unwelcome onslaught of wide-eyed storytelling, and as I got closer, I realised that Craig's newfound captor was, in fact, Nigel's missus. It dawned on me as I heard Nigel cry out from beside me, "Lynn, I've just met Tom!" This had been their plan all along. Divide and conquer. Not a bad strategy for a couple of 50-somethings with a penchant for pineapple kush. Have we got one here? The DJ began playing inappropriately loud rave songs that kept asking me whether I was better off alone. I immediately began to panic, not because of the question or even the obvious aversion I had to spending more time with Nigel and his wife, but because I'd sold a lie to Nigel that may have already been unravelled by Lynn interrogating Craig. So approaching the table, I shook Lynn's hand, said hello. Nigel and I took our seats opposite Craig and Lynn, weirdly. So desperately seeking to get ahead of the story, I immediately turned to Craig. I was just telling Nigel about the shark. Craig looked somewhat confused and alarmed. All he could muster was, "What?" "The shark that took my arms. I was just telling Nigel." Craig looked even more confused, but seemed to accept what I was saying. Then my worst nightmare came true. Lynn chimed in. "What shark? Craig told me you had a disease." Fuck. I should have got my story straight with Craig, but the timing had been unkind. I had to think on my feet. I'm aware of the irony in that statement. "He says that sometimes," I yelled over the insanely loud music. "When he doesn't want to speak on my behalf, sometimes I don't like talking about the shark. It brings back memories." "Oh dear," Lynn responded. I said, "Yeah, especially when I'm at sea." "That's often the place I think about it most." "Oh dear," she repeated. Nigel interrupted. "Sorry for asking before, mate, if it wasn't my place and all." No, don't be silly, I responded. I mean, if it bothered me that much, I would have just made up some bullshit story about what happened. I could tell that Craig was suppressing a smoke. Even I winced slightly at the audacity of that last gambit. We drank that night with Lynn and Nigel for the rest of the evening, them telling us stories of their families and lives and us responding in kind. They never brought up the shark again. People had begun to meander onto the dance floor, which provided great fodder for our conversation. The image of one ectomorphic gentleman of about 60, flailing his arms and legs about in no particular rhythm to Horny by Mouse T, remains etched in my memory to this day. Craig and I sat and drank, watching the train wreck unfold in slow motion. We sat for hours. I remember observing the DJ and thinking, what an easy gig that must be. Playing music to groups of people who are out having fun on a night out, or in this case, their holidays, with all the optimism that came along with that. Then I glanced over to Lynn and Nigel. They were dancing in front of the DJ booth so sloppily, it was a wonder they could remain upright. I saw Lynn lean towards the DJ and yell a request. At the same time, Nigel slipped on a spilt drink and hit the floor in an unceremonious fashion. It was then that I remember thinking, I never want to become a DJ. And that's all from me.
Tom Nash!
Thank you so much.